Welcome to Triumph IAS. It's a daily mains practice question and answer series. This program is exclusively designed for UPSC CSE aspirants. In this video discussion, we will discuss UPSC CSE mains previous 25-year questions. Question number 1. The Bhakti movement received a remarkable reorientation with the advent of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Discuss. Let's start with the introduction of the answer. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a famous Hindu mystic saint and key revivalist in the Vaishnavite movement in Bengal during the 16th century. The main body of the answer should be number 1. He was one of the most renowned and celebrated proponent of the Vaishnavite school of bhakti that centers around the absolute devotion to Lord Krishna. Number 2. For Chaitanya, the sole means by which one can reach God in his purest form was through devotion or bhakti. The Bhakti movement received a remarkable reorientation with the advent of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya was an exponent of the Radha Krishna cult. Number 3. Chaitanya's exposition of Raslila is one of his most profound contributions to Indian philosophy. He condemned the caste system and baseless rituals prevalent in the Indian society. Number 4. His teachings were meant for all, and his followers included low-caste Hindus and even Muslims. He embraced the so-called Chandala and the socially oppressed classes. Number 5. He also laid emphasis on moral virtues such as mercy, truth, benevolence, faith, honesty, and humanity. Thus his ideas and teachings carried a universal appeal. It was a revivalist movement which brought about unity in Hindu society. Number 6. Chaitanya's main concern was to exalt the superiority of Krishna over all other Hindu deities. Chaitanya's teachings centered around love. He opened the doors of divine love to all by chanting and singing the glories of Krishna in the form of kirtans. Conclusion of the answer is number 1. Chaitanya was a champion of social liberation. He denounced caste system and stood for the universal brotherhood of man. At the same time, he was very much opposed to the domination of the priestly class and superfluous rituals and ceremonies. Number 2. It was due to his attitude of social liberation that people of socially oppressed classes became his disciples. Question number 2. Parliament's power to amend the Constitution is a limited power and it cannot be enlarged into absolute power. In the light of this statement, explain whether Parliament under Article 368 of the Constitution can destroy the basic structure of the Constitution by expanding its amending power. Let's start with the introduction of the answer. The theory of basic structure very effectively proved to be a limitation on the amending power of the Indian Parliament. The basic structure doctrine applies only to the constitutionality of amendments and not to ordinary acts of Indian Parliament, which must conform to the entirety of the Constitution and not just its basic structure. The main body of the answer should be number 1. The final word on the issue of amendability can be related to basic structure defined in Keswananda Bharati's case. Number 2. To name a few, Minerva Mill's case, S.P. Sampath Kumar's case, and L. Chandra Kumar's case are well based on the principle of basic structure, and this situation is unlikely to change in the near future. Number 3. It is clear that all laws and constitutional amendments are now subject to judicial review, and laws that transgress the basic structure are likely to be struck down by the Supreme Court. Number 4. In essence, Indian Parliament's power to amend the Constitution is not absolute, and the Supreme Court is the final arbiter over and interpreter of all constitutional amendments according to the Constitution. Parliament and the state legislatures in India have the power to make laws within their respective jurisdictions. Number 5. This power is not absolute in nature. The Constitution vests in the judiciary the power to adjudicate upon the constitutional validity of all laws. Number 6. If a law made by Parliament or the state legislatures violates any provision of the Constitution, the Supreme Court has the power to declare such a law invalid or ultra vires. Number 7. This check notwithstanding, the Founding Fathers wanted the Constitution to be an adaptable document rather than a rigid framework for governance. Number 8. Hence Parliament was invested with the power to amend the Constitution. Article 368 of the Constitution gives the impression that Parliament's amending powers are absolute and encompass all parts of the document. Number 9. But the Supreme Court has acted as a brake to the legislative enthusiasm of Parliament ever since independence. Conclusion of the answer is the intention of preserving the original ideals envisioned by the Constitution makers. The Apex Court pronounced that Parliament could not distort, damage or alter the basic features of the Constitution under the pretext of amending it. Question number 3. The public expenditure management is a challenge to the Government of India in context of budget making during the post-liberalization period. Clarify it. Let's start with the introduction of the answer. Public expenditure management, PEM, is a framework of fiscal reform to enhance effectiveness of public policy. PEM is being applied to fiscal reform in developed as well as developing countries as a core of measures to maximize outcome of public policy. The main body of the answer should be number 1. The economy was facing problems of declining foreign exchange, growing imports without matching rise in exports, and high inflation. India changed its economic policies in 1991 due to a financial crisis and pressure from international organizations like the World Bank and IMF. Number 2. Fiscal policy is a critical component of the policy framework pursued since the initiation of economic reforms in India in 1991 to achieve the objectives of economic growth, price stability, and equity. To achieve these objectives, it was necessary to raise more resources through taxation and restrain the growth of unproductive and non-plan expenditure. Number 3. During the mid-90s there was setback in this policy when Fifth Pay Commission's recommendations of sharp hike in wages and salaries were accepted, resulting in large increase in non-plan government expenditure and consequently rise in fiscal deficit. Number 4. In the context of improving public expenditure management, there is a new recognition on the role of institutional arrangements in influencing budget outcomes in the areas of aggregate fiscal discipline, strategic allocation of resources, and operational efficiency. Number 5. The essential requirements for public expenditure management include performance focus, link between policy making, planning, and budgeting, well-functioning accounting and financial management systems, and appropriate links between budgeting and other systems of the government. Number 6. In India too, there is an emphasis on improving outcomes of public expenditure in central and state governments through the instrument of outcome budgets. However, there have been several limitations that impede widespread practical use of the outcome-based budgeting. Conclusion of the answer is these include segmentation of expenditure between plan and non-plan, absence of a hard budget constraint, lack of incentives to ministries to reallocate resources, non-availability of information on costing of services, problems in budget and accounting classification, inadequate information systems on transfers of resources to states, and absence of robust financial management information systems.